Working Class Framer, and I'm your co-host, Josue here with my co-host.
Austin.
And last night we saw Backrooms. We went to the Backrooms, baby, and there
Dude.
was a lot of excitement around this movie. A lot of the talk, I'm surprised, has revolved around the director and his age for very good reason too. There's a lot to be said about a young guy at 20, like he was 19 when he directed this. Okay, so there's a lot to be said about a 19-year-old directing a movie that is getting backed by A24 and a series that is beloved by so many people. The couple that I talked to walking outside who we made the Backrooms joke about, they were like, yeah, I was in love with Backrooms, and I was switched from Roblox to Backrooms, and it's just like so ingrained with internet culture. But I was extremely excited. I just felt like this guy who
hmm
was in high school making these crazy videos was going to come out and make his movie and follow his vision, which I found to be super exciting. Austin, what do you think? Like, what were your thoughts walking into this? Because I know I was excited.
Honestly, it's funny that you had because see you had such an extensive knowledge of like the lore of this person, Kane Parson, and like the world he created. I literally knew this from
I
like
did not
just
actually.
really because I feel
So
because for the whole time I feel like you've been like the backrooms guy. So I'm like
Well,
I
I've
figured
been the
you knew.
Backrooms hype man more than anything. I've been the Backrooms hype
Fair.
man. Because
Okay.
I found out about the Backrooms, and I've always been into creepy pasta stuff, especially on social media.
hmm
More so than just the Backrooms itself, but creepy pastas. Those videos have always intrigued me. It's always been something that I've just like
hmm
whenever I see it on my feed, I stop and I let my mind wander in these spaces. It's always so much fun. And I had heard about the Backrooms a while back, but I never dove deep into
hmm
it. It just felt like another sanction of creepypasta, which it is, but it
hmm
became a fucking phenomenon.
hmm
So my lore on the Backrooms was just going and seeing Kane Parsons' Backrooms just a couple months back and really
hmm
diving into this world, and I got familiar with the essence of it, but truly I didn't even need to go to the movies to see the short films to understand like, oh, the horrors are in the
hmm
endless vacuum that is the Backrooms. But yeah, that was my
Yeah.
attachment to it. But like, what were your thoughts of going into it? Because I know you didn't have attachments. You didn't know anything about the
No.
Backrooms,
No,
which makes
Backrooms
your
was
experience
always this.
very unique because you have nothing going here. You're just hopping straight into it.
Yeah, I had no idea what Backrooms was going into it. I literally only knew it from the aesthetic quality, where it was like, the pictures that elicit like Backrooms energy, I guess. Just like the various sort of videos I've seen on like TikTok of like Backrooms-esque content. And I guess sort of like I've heard ruminations about it, like the lore and stuff, but I had no concrete understanding or I guess reading of what it could or is. I just knew this was a young director and
Yeah.
this was like a concept and genre that has been permeated on the internet for a long time, but like I had no engagement with it directly.
Yeah, no, I was ecstatic to enter this world. I felt like
hmm
watching a Backrooms movie, a Backrooms concept be fleshed out on the big screen. It just feels like a perfect meshing of worlds, especially because like so much of the Backrooms is immersion, right? It's immersing
hmm
yourself into these worlds. And what better place than to immerse yourself at the movies watching the Backrooms? And so obviously there's a
Yeah.
lot of skepticism, right? He's a young filmmaker.
hmm
He has his experience, and then there was a rumor about Kane Parson not being the fucking director, which is so
Yeah.
fucking
Really stupid.
ridiculous. Like, do people understand how movies works? I've always said the claim: movies
No, they
are
don't.
the greatest group project to ever exist because, like, you have all
hmm
these people that are all these moving pieces, right? Like, you have a cinematographer that you can tell them, "I want this shot to look and
hmm
feel this way with this lens," but ultimately, the cinematographer is the one that ends up putting their flair on it. When you have an editor, it is not just your pacing, it is a communication between you and an artist whose craft is editing. Or even in the lighting crew, everybody brings their own
hmm
talent to the table, and there is a maestro at the top of that chart going three, two, one, action, and that
hmm
would be Kane Parsons. And you could
Yes.
feel it in this direction. And I gotta say, I absolutely adore this. I absolutely lost my mind at how much I actually enjoyed this. So much so that I dropped Austin off for our listeners. I dropped Austin
Hmm.
back off because he left his car at my place, and I drove to another theater to go rewatch it the same night because I just had to go back. And I fell in love with the
Hmm.
world building, the score, the performances on my second time watching were just breathtaking and
Hmm.
beautiful, and very much in the same respect as the Backrooms. They're very acute, they're very toned into this world. I felt so immersed, and that's what I wanted from Backrooms. And I think Kane Parson knocked it
Hmm.
out of the park. Austin, what were your thoughts like coming out of it? Because I know we talked a little bit about it when we were at the movies, but what did you think about it when
Hmm.
we were we were walking out? Like, what are your thoughts as you walked out of the Backrooms?
Kane Parsons' technical precision in this is so impressive. I actually at points thought to myself, damn, he could be potentially as good as a David Fincher one day. I mean, give him some more films. I think the experience in the liminal space that is the Backrooms that he created for this film with the funding of A24, which, by the way, the budget was well spent. This is like a playground for fans of liminal horror and anything atmospheric. I was so mortified by this movie, and I think considering what it's trying to elicit, that sort of uncomfortable feeling of like a dreamlike space, I was riveted. The whole movie, I was glued to my seat, and there was points where like it was hitting me so deep emotionally at a core that struck a nerve that like I almost disassociated. Like it was
Mm.
really disorienting. Dude, I even think about it right now. I was completely caught off guard by this movie. This movie's
Yeah.
fantastic. It's
Yeah, man.
fantastic. And the more I think
Yeah.
about it and ruminate about it and process it, I'm even more enamored with it.
Yeah. I talk about this with movies that I I feel like will have long lasting impacts on me, and I
Hmm.
think that's why when I walk out of a movie I'm able to process so much. I'm just reflecting on my experience, the themes it
Hmm.
presents to me, the visual experience. I feel like it almost planted a seed in my brain and a fascination for a world that I already kind of
Hmm.
adored, but I fell in love with even more.
Hmm.
I felt like I could close my eyes and go back to the back rooms. And that's why I ran back. That's why I went and watched
Yeah.
this again, because I was just like,
Yeah.
oh my God, like I was transported to dreams that I never thought were
Hmm.
possible, to like visually see them. And reason why I get so disappointed sometimes when people say, "Oh, like yeah, the visuals are cool, but like the story wasn't there."
Hmm.
I'm sorry, I'm watching a movie, my guy. I'm like I'm looking at
Yeah.
everything, and I'm when I made my at a theater reaction video, I talked about this being one of my favorite visually looking movies of the year, and I think it might be the best
Yeah.
looking movie of the year because
It
it is
is.
nailed to precision. The switches from the handheld camera to digital cam feel seamless. That's what I'll say. It feels seamless. I don't feel like I
Yeah.
lost any sort of that the feeling that the handheld was bringing to me, because the lighting and the set designs in the back rooms are
Hmm.
so fucking unbelievable that I never felt
Hmm.
like I got taken away. I was just immersed deeper and deeper. It felt like tides just
Yeah.
washing over me.
Well, I was gonna say the set is so organic and so informing of like the emotions of the story that was my big takeaway was like anyone who says this story sucks, I actually will go as far as to say you're wrong. Like that, I mean, I know that's my just take, but like I was so impressed with the fact that he managed to take this very barren space that and made it, and on top of making it feel so organic and lived in, how it informed the actual emotion of the story. It was devastating. And I think so much of what makes this film work for me, on top of the technical precision, I'm going to say this right now. I think this looks better than anything I've seen this year. And on top of that, the craft on display here, it looks better than some filmmakers that are like decades into their careers. And it just like the way this film submerges you in what it's trying to say and the way it says all of it with, once again, I always say this every review we do, no words. And the way the back rooms and how much the visuals speak for themselves, it's so crystal clear and defined. It's beautiful. It's breathtaking. I'm just like this whole morning I was thinking about this goddamn movie. I left this going, that was phenomenal. Not good.
Yeah, man.
That was transcendental at points.
Yeah, let's
I
talk
have
about
to give my kudos
Chiwetel.
to Kane.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about Chiwetel Ejiofor because I keep thinking back to his
Oh, career
performance, and
defining.
like, there's so much childlike wonder and fear in this movie. I want to get your thoughts on Chiwetel Ejiofor and Renata Rensve.
Hmm.
How do you feel about their performances? What stood out to you?
Dude, I think Chiwetel Ejiofor gives like probably one of his career bests in this film.
Wow.
There is, and
Above
I don't
12
know
Years
how
a
else I can
Slave?
talk about this without spoilers, so spoiler warning. It's about neck and neck for me. Like I really wasn't because going in, I knew like obviously he's a competent actor. I didn't think like
Yeah,
oh he
no,
was gonna phone it in,
for
but
sure not.
the amount of depth that is apparent in his performance is like extremely vulnerable. And I think what really sort of like gripped me about it was the fact that it's so disturbing at times, but also so tender and also really angry. And the sort of spectrum of emotion he's tapping into with this performance is really stellar. I think
Yeah.
it's truly commendable work. And even how do you say her name? Renata
Renata
Rensve?
Rensve? Yeah, Renata Rensve.
Rensve. I will say, if I had to give one complaint about this movie, I think her character and her performance could have been tapped into a little more thoroughly. But I
Yeah.
think what she does deliver is very good, and I think
Yeah.
she's very, very, very competent, and at times very just as sort of emotional and gripping as his. I just think Chiwetel in this film is like he's just given more to like chew on, and I think what he does with it is spectacular. I think he really runs home with it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that her character, and the more that I'm thinking about it, the more that it is given to us, but it's up to us to kind of piece it together. I obviously do think that it could
Yeah,
have been explored a little bit better, maybe. But I mean, we talk
yeah.
about some of the opening sequences in this movie are the
Hmm.
house being destroyed, right?
Hmm.
I assume
Yeah.
she hasn't lived there for a long fucking time. You know, like she left
Hmm.
that house because like she was a kid and her mom was going through a lot of mental health struggles. But she goes there and she's
Yeah.
smoking a cigarette, and we see the house being destroyed. And it's almost like her own trauma being like broken down. And even then, as
Hmm.
she's kind of letting go, she takes a
Hmm.
part of that concrete. That's what she carries with her. It's the handprint from the concrete.
Hmm.
And she carries it with her because, like, as much as Chiwetel Ejiofor's character is struggling to move past these moments where he cannot take any
Hmm.
accountability and he's holding on to these his demons, Renata Rensve's character is also holding on to her own demons, her own things that
Hmm.
she has not faced or maybe fully grappled with. And we see that present when she's at a party and she's having a conversation with the
Hmm.
one of the women at the party, and she looks over her shoulder. She's totally zones out of the conversation and she
Yeah.
focuses on a mother and a daughter having a relationship. And to me, that scene cuts a little bit deeper too, because she's just reminiscing on what she could have had. To me, that
Hmm.
scene reads like, I wish I had tender moments like that with my mom,
Hmm.
because we see the moments that she shared with her mother. And the moments
Hmm.
were, at times, they were good, and at other times they were horrific, to the point where she wasn't even allowed to look out a window because her mom thought she
Hmm.
was like leaving somewhere. And her mom was
Yeah.
struggling deeply with something that she obviously had to cope with by going to a mental institution. To me, I'm assuming is that there was a point where she wasn't even allowed to go to school anymore.
No.
That's why they had to come in and break down the doors and be like, where is this little girl? Like, you need help. And
Hmm.
they came to help her, but left a lot of open scars
Hmm.
with Renata Rensve's character. I find it so deeply moving and harrowing that these two characters both were dealing with a lot. And she presents these opportunities for her clients and people around the world to open the window when she herself hasn't been able to open up the window for her own self. And
No.
she seems well put together, but even then, it's funny
Hmm.
because Chiwetel Ejiofor's character calls it out to her face. He's like, for a shrink, you have a really bad poker face. And I thought that to
Yeah.
myself earlier in the movie, and I think this is a tone to Renata Rensve's performance, right? Because her performance is really incredible in this, because she has to
Hmm.
play a shrink who doesn't entirely believe what she's saying, right?
Hmm.
And I noticed that even in their beginning conversations, as she was asking Chiwetel Ejiofor, she plays this very standard of like run of the mill therapist who's just like, oh, okay, how do you feel about this? How do you feel
Mhm.
about that? But I never once felt like she truly believed what she was saying or she was fully convinced of like trying
No.
to help
Yeah.
someone. And it becomes very apparent because of the stuff that she herself is dealing with. And I think back to the
Hmm.
scene too where she's sitting and she's watching her commercial and, that scene to me, I look back at that and I think to myself, there's so much said there without anything being said. She's sitting, she's
Hmm.
eating, she's alone, and she's looking at this trailer being like, oh my God, like, am I just selling bullshit? Because it almost feels
Just
that way,
phoning it
right?
in.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
She's
feels that
phoning
way.
it in. Yeah.
These guru therapists who are on TV being like, I
Hmm.
got the solution for you. And I feel like she looks at
Yeah.
that TV and that trailer being like, God, I'm a
Hmm.
fraud. Like I
Yeah.
haven't done this shit. I haven't done the work, and but it's the
Yeah.
way that I live. It's I help others and I haven't even been able to help myself. And I think that's why she feels so called to do something about Chiwetel Ejiofor's character and his struggles cuz
Hmm.
it almost feels like she can maybe help him and she goes out of her way to pull up and try to find
Yeah.
him. Like she doesn't take the proper steps, but it's almost like maybe I can save him,
No.
you know?
I think the thing about this film too is that the Backrooms, and I think this was sort of a very bold and provocative way to sort of infuse the Backrooms itself with the themes. The idea of we continuously loop through these repetitive patterns in our life, thinking things will be changing, or there's this chance that something will grow organically out of it that is completely different and shifted from the problems you were experiencing. These are two people that are stuck. They're
Yeah.
stuck in what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I think and especially with Chiwetel's character, when he goes to the back rooms, I almost see it as sort of like this vivid mirror into his soul. And even with the entity being like a really large, cartoonish, gargantuan caricature of his ego and his violence, the way it sort of reflects back to you what you are and what's really going on. Because I think of that final scene where she's crawling through that tight corridor and you see the entity reaching for her, and I was like, right there is the character of Clark, a man trapped in a cage, and the cage being his furniture store. It's just beautiful. I think distinctly they're going through two very different types of trauma, where one's more subdued and internal, where she's not outwardly struggling like Clark is, where his is more volatile. He's literally kicked out of his house. He's an alcoholic. I mean, they don't say it outright, but there's hints that he's violent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and I think of how the movie uses those visuals of the back rooms to reflect back everything in them. And I
Yeah.
think of that one shot specifically for her where it shows her house, where her mom, I think, just had agoraphobia or some mental illness where she got locked up inside that house. And it starts to sort of shift downward and show a more like mutated version of that room until it fully looks like it's immersed in the Backrooms universe.
Yeah.
And with that one visual, I figured out everything with her. I was like, oh, it's that encased little box she's trying to break free of, and they're both trying to break free of. You know what I mean? And I think that's why I was so immersed with it because as sort of like outlandish as the back rooms can be at times, with like these shape-shifting walls and all that, there's something very human at its core. And I think it sort of operated as a mirror. The theme of the loops and stuff in our lives, it hit really close to home. But like I feel like that's deeply why it upset me at times.
Yeah. I think that playing into this sort of loop that we throw ourselves into, we talked about this on our drive
Hmm.
home. The themes of kind of just conforming to never facing the worst parts of ourselves or the stuff that we are battling within ourselves because
Hmm.
sometimes just living with that guilt, sometimes living with our trauma, living with
Hmm.
everything that burdens us is
Hmm.
easier than having to rip it out of ourselves, hang it out and really untangle all of the stuff that burdens us and facing that
Hmm.
or maybe facing the sins that we've done, right? Because again, both
Hmm.
of these people are struggling with different things, but they both struggle with them and they
Hmm.
refuse to look at it in its face for what it is until
Hmm.
Renata Rensby's character is like, dude, you're the fucking problem. Like you don't face
Yeah.
shit. Like your wife left you because you never had the capacity to look at yourself and be like, where am I
No.
fucking up? What am I
Yeah.
doing? You know? And in Renata Renze's character's case, right? She's a
No.
I don't want to say, I guess in a way she's a victim, right? But
She is.
victim feels strong, you know.
Well, in a
It's
very
just,
literal sense, yes.
yeah, you know, but you know, she didn't do anything wrong. She's just had to carry around this
No.
sort of unresolved trauma from being raised without a mother, and also seeing your mother lose her sanity to the point where it starts to affect you. And it affected
Hmm.
her childhood. It had affected the like a small period of her life where she probably wasn't going to school. She probably wasn't being a normal kid, and then to kind of be thrust into the world without a mother and sort of face everything head on must
Hmm.
be heavy as fuck, you know. And I think that's why her
Yeah.
mind continues to go back to that moment and that house. I think to myself about why the Backrooms works in such a horrific way and beautiful way is that so much of
Hmm.
these Backrooms are revolving around the places that we are most of our lives,
Hmm.
office buildings and houses. Like
Yeah.
that is where
Well,
most of our lives revolve around, you
yes.
know?
We had a homie kind of say, he didn't like how the real life almost had sort of a similarity to the back rooms, but I think in a weird way, I think the idyllic imagery of the neighborhoods and the office buildings and the furniture store that they inhabit have this underlying festering resentment, and it's almost like the back rooms is like this morbid contortion of that idyllic reality, and specifically where she changes. She has this whole thing where, they both seem like average people. She's a therapist. And I love that scene where she's at the table where she matures. She has the sort of like moment where she sort of wisens up and she goes, I can't help you because I can't help myself right now. There is a burden in me. There is a flaming hole that has not been filled. And it's almost borderline irresponsible of me to think that I can save you. Whereas Chiwetel devolves. He literally he becomes I guess he melds with his pain, where instead of
Yeah.
having that moment to sort of reflect and let go and be like, yeah, I was a piece of shit. I was abusive. I was not being my best version. He chooses to sort of languish forever in that sort of fake reality. And I think
Yeah.
there's something really telling in their characters in that moment of acceptance and
Mm.
denial.
Mm.
I think they're both different sides of the paradigm right there.
Yeah. And
Hmm.
it's two broken people on different spectrums,
Very broken.
but they're both
Hmm.
in these cycles. They're both refuse to kind of face their own burdens and they
Hmm.
refuse to unpack anything within themselves.
Yeah.
And I think refuse is a strong word because they both clearly are trying to, you know. And I think that
Yeah.
Chiwetel Ejiofor, for the most part, is doing more than Renata Rentzvey's character because she tells herself she
Hmm.
is, but she carries around that piece of herself from a very tortured moment,
Hmm.
and which would be not bad in any regular sense, but clearly it's affecting her. Clearly it's something that she continues to think about, you know. And whereas
Yeah.
Chiwetel Ejiofor was actively going to therapy, was trying to better himself
Hmm.
until he was like, I can't, like, I can't, I like, that's why that scene is so heartbreaking. And to see him cry in that
Yeah.
moment, almost like I did, I shed tears last night on my second watch because I was
Hmm.
just like, God, have I not been there where I'm just like, you know what, like, I am broken and I would prefer to stay broken because this
Yeah.
is okay to this feels right. This feels right because
Hmm.
it's terrifying to
Yeah.
face your own to
Hmm.
face your own sins, to face your own downfalls and try to improve
Hmm.
on them because it is hard. And we see him
Yeah.
struggle with that. And
Oh,
Renata
yeah.
Rensvey's character, I think, also breaks in that moment because she's looking at him, accepting it. She realizes, oh my God, I've been doing the same thing. I
Hmm.
have been just, I'm okay here. I'm okay reliving this thing over and over again.
Yeah.
Which is why when you brought up that scene about the chasing and him being in the cage, I noticed that the first time, but watching it on the second, as she's going down that corridor, this tight space. It's a very
Hmm.
uncomfortable space. I love how that feels, right? It's
Hmm.
very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
He's clawing. I don't
Hmm.
even feel that scene, right? Because why didn't he kill her? Because he had her, right? I think in
Yeah.
that moment, that scene feels to me like he was calling out for help. Like, if you
Hmm.
see that hand,
Oh,
the
absolutely.
hand is just like, hold me. The hand is like begging,
Hmm.
and there's a moment in her face that looks at him with like
Hmm.
sadness, deep sadness. She's frightened, but she's
Yeah.
also like frightened of what she could become. And that's why that
Yeah.
moment she defeats
Hmm.
him by the literal trauma that she carried with him. And she's just like, no, I refuse. I refuse to be,
Hmm.
to hold on to this anymore. I am a new person now,
Hmm.
which is why that ending that you talked about,
Yeah.
and talk to me a little bit about that ending, because I know that you had your interpretation. And I think this kind of ties into what I was feeling, especially with that scene.
To sort of go back just for 1 second,
Sure.
I also think what's interesting about that ending is that there's a very subtle notion in it that you can't save someone who isn't self-aware and is unwilling to self-reflect. Because as much as he is admitting I'm broken, he is that heartbreaking line where he says, "For once, I feel like I'm right where I'm supposed to be."
Yeah.
And but the problem with that is right where he is exactly where he started. And I sort of also want to add to your notion about her going through the corridor where that's also her letting go of something you can't fix. It's in the past. And whereas she's able to sort of literally ascend to the light, he's left in the back rooms. And I sort of see it as like he's gonna forever repeat that cycle because as much as he understands there is a problem, he himself says it. I don't want to change. And that's
Yeah.
the problem is like, so the only thing he can ever do with that is, as the entity does, consume everyone around him, eat those, take energy from people. And
So
going
much
into
so
that
that he
ending,
literally eats himself, because
literally eats
if you
himself.
hold on to something, no matter how comfortable you feel, it is going
Hmm.
to end up eating you
Which is
anyways.
which is literally his ego. He
Mm-hmm.
tells that creature we don't have to change. And what does an
He's
egotistical
so
person
jolly.
want to hear?
Yay, we don't have to
No,
change.
yeah, we don't have to change. And an unself-aware person, they don't think there's anything wrong with him. So the entity eating him is almost him eating his truth and continuing on his path. And I think of that ending too, where and as we were talking about, she leaves and there's a shot at the very end of her sitting in the seat and it has like the mutated face. And I sort of see it as like, because I kind of pondered about this all night, where that part of us is always in there. Even when we do change,
Mm-hmm.
there's always going to be that thing you can sort of devolve back into. There's always that pathway to sort of become circular again. She got out of it, but if she's not careful, just as Chiwetel's not careful, you can end up being that person again. And in a way, that room kind of looks like her therapy room too, just a
Mm.
caricature of who you think you are.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's just and the whole movie to me is that's really the big thing I was pulling from it was like the sort of dynamic, the Venn diagram of who we think we are and what we really are. And this is a movie where that synthesizes, and when they go to the back rooms, they get a complete portrait. And one chose to change and one didn't. Chiwetel Ejiofor's character is a very realistic portrait of a crash out to me, where sure, he has those bad qualities we were talking about. He even got two people killed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We have to talk about that too. He got two people killed.
Right.
But that scene when he's breaking down, the vulnerability he displays and the sort of shaky, panic he displays is very realistic because this isn't a man who woke up one day and was like, I want to be an evil person. This is just a person who made a catalog of bad decisions in his life. And now he has it right in front of him, that catalog, and he has to just accept it. And it's like that's how I kind of view life in a lot of ways. Where like, I don't think a lot of people necessarily go out of their way to be bad people, but you just make a compounding series of decisions and then you end up in this rut. And now you have this sort of like trail of tears, quote unquote, that just it haunts you. And you can either move along and try to stop the trail, get off of it, and start a new path, or you stay in the back rooms forever.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, and I found these character studies just so intriguing and not over the
Hmm.
top to where I felt like I was like fully invested into them, but also gave a lot of space for me to kind of explore my own interpretations of it and also allow myself
Hmm.
to simmer in the back rooms, which I think a lot of people's
Hmm.
complaints about the characters. I I kind of disagree almost entirely. I think these characters, sure, could they have gone more? Sure, but I really, really enjoyed what they did with these characters. And there's a lot that's being said that's not being said. I love that we're on the same page here because like
Yeah.
there is so much that I picked up on that
Hmm.
again is not being explicitly said, and
Hmm.
I love when a filmmaker does that, and I love that Kane Parson like trusted the audience with that, and I think that it's very
Hmm.
ballsy considering that this is a movie that a lot of audiences are going to gravitate towards. There's just a lot of hype around it, and I
Hmm.
do think that audiences are
Well deserved.
yeah, I think audiences are going to be split, but I am happy to be on the side of
Hmm.
fully in love with this movie. This movie is my movie of
Hmm.
the year. Austin, I think
My
you're
movie of the
spot
year
on.
too.
I think you're spot on. This is there's so much that I love about this movie and I could gush about it for hours. We might even do another episode just gushing even some more cuz I'm just even as I'm
Dude,
finishing
I
this
have more to talk about. I would love to talk about this for like hours.
yeah, let's schedule in another podcast.
Hmm.
But for now, these are our
Hmm.
out of theater reaction thoughts. Basically, we just saw this last night. Listen, guys,
Crazy
we're
movie.
excited to. We have a lot of stuff planned out for this pod that we're still
We
working
do.
on. But again, just like Obsession, we had to do a podcast for
Hmm.
the Backrooms. Kane Parsons, the Backrooms. Thank you guys for joining us. Working Class
Thank
Framing.
you
I'm your
guys.
co-host, host Sway Adiana here with my co-host.
Austin,
We'll catch y'all on the next one. Peace.
love you guys. Sayonara.
Class